Hey guys, we are picking up on page 135 at the very top of it. I felt sad today, he had heard his mother say, and they had comforted her. But now Jonas had experienced real sadness. He had felt grief. He knew that there was no quick comfort for emotions like those. These were deeper, and they did not need to be told. They were felt. Today he felt happiness. Asher! He sped his friend's bicycle. He spied his friend's bicycle leaning against a tree at the edge of the playing field. Nearby, other bikes were strewn about on the ground. On a holiday, the usual rules of order could be disregarded. He skidded to a stop and dropped his own bike beside the others. "Hey, Ash," he shouted, looking around. There seemed to be no one in the playing area. "Where are you?" Psh! A child's voice, coming from behind a nearby bush, made a sound like pow pow, pow. A female 11 named Tanya staggered toward from where she had been riding. Dramatically, she clutched her stomach and stumbled about in a zigzag pattern. Groaning, "You got me," she called, and fell to the ground, grinning. Blam! Jonas, standing on the side of the playing field, recognized Asher's voice. He saw his friend aiming an imaginary weapon in his hand. Dart from behind one tree to another. Blam! "You're in my line of ambush, Jonas, watch out!" Jonas stepped back. He moved behind Asher's bike and knelt so that he was out of sight. It was a game he had often played with the other children, a game of good guys and bad guys, a harmless pastime that used up their contained energy and ended only when they all posed in a freakish posture on the ground. He had never recognized it before as a game of war. "Attack!" The shout came from behind the small store house where play equipment was kept. Three children dashed forward, their imaginary weapons in a firing position. From the opposite side of the field came an opposing shout, "Counterattack!" From their hiding place, a horde of children, Jonas recognized Fiona in the group, emerged, running in a crouched position, firing across the field. Several of them had stopped, grabbed their own shoulders and chests with exaggerated gestures, and pretended to be hit. They dropped to the ground and lay, suppressing giggles. Feelings surged within Jonas. He found himself walking forward into the field. "You're hit, Jonas," Asher yelled from behind the tree. "Pow, you're hit again." Jonas stood alone in the center of the field. Several of the children raised their heads and looked at him uneasily. The attacking army slowed, emerging from their crouched position, and watched to see what he was doing. In his mind, Jonas saw again the faces of the boy who had been lying dying on a field and had begged him for water. He had a sudden choking feeling, as if it were difficult to breathe. One of these children raised an imaginary rifle and made an attempt to destroy him with a firing noise. Phew! And then they were all silent, standing awkwardly, and the only sound was the sound of Jonas's shuddering breaths. He was struggling not to cry. Gradually, when nothing happened, nothing changed. The children looked at each other nervously and went away. He heard the sounds as they righted their bikes and began to ride down the path that led from the fields. Only Asher and Fiona remained. "What's wrong, Jonas? It was only a game," Fiona said. "You ruined it," Asher said with an irritated voice. "Don't play it anymore," Jonas pleaded. I'm the one who's training for assistant recreation director," Asher pointed out angrily. "Games aren't your area of expertise." "Expertise," Jonas corrected him. Oh, sorry. Games aren't your area of expertness. Expertise, Jonas corrected him automatically. "Whatever. You can't say what we play, even if you are going to be the new receiver." Asher looked warily at him. "I apologize for not paying you the respect you deserve," he mumbled. "Asher," Jonas said. He was trying to speak carefully and with kindness to say exactly what he wanted to say. "You had no way of knowing this. I didn't know it myself until recently, but it's a cruel game. In the past, there have been—" "I said I apologize, Jonas." Jonas sighed. It was no use. Of course, Asher couldn't understand. "Accept your apology, Asher," he said wearily. "Do you want to go for a ride along the river, Jonas?" Fiona asked, biting her lip with nervousness. Jonas looked at her. She was so lovely. For a fleeting instant, he thought he would like nothing better than to ride peacefully along the river path, laughing and talking with his gentle female friend. But he knew such times had been taken from him now. He shook his head. After a moment, his two friends turned and went to their bikes. He watched as they rode away. Jonas trudged to the bench beside the storehouse and sat down, overwhelmed with feelings of loss. His childhood, his friendships, his carefree sense of security, all of those things seemed to be slipping away. With his new heightened feelings, he was overwhelmed by sadness at the way the others had laughed and shouted playing at war, but he knew that they could not understand why. Without the memories, he felt such love for Asher and Fiona, but they could not feel it back without the memories, and he could not give it to them. Jonas knew with certainty that he could change nothing. Back in their dwelling that evening, Lily chattered merrily about the wonderful holiday she had had, playing with her friends, having her midday meal outdoors, and, she confessed, sneaking a very short try on her father's bicycle. I can't wait until I get my very own bicycle next month. Father's is too big for me. I fell, she explained, matter-of-factly. Good thing Gabe wasn't in the child seat. A very good thing, Mother agreed, frowning at the idea of it. Gabriel waved his arms and at the mention of himself. He had begun to walk just the week before. His first steps of a new child were always the occasion for a celebration at the nurturing center, Father said, but also for the introduction of a discipline wand. Now, Father brought the slender instrument home with each night in case Gabriel misbehaved. But he was a happy, easygoing toddler. Now he moved unsteadily across the room, laughing. Gay, he chirped. Gay, it was the way he said his own name. Jonas brightened. It had been a depressing day for him after such a bright start, but he set his gloom thoughts aside. He thought about starting to teach Lily to ride so that she could speed off proudly at her ceremony of 9, which would be coming soon. It was hard to believe that it was almost December again, and that almost a year had passed since he had become a 12. He smiled as he watched the new child plant one small foot carefully before the other, grinning with glee at his own steps as he tried them out. I want to get to sleep early tonight, Father said. Tomorrow's a busy day for me. The twins are being born tomorrow, and the test results show that they're identical. One for here, one for elsewhere, Lily chanted. One for here, one for else. Do you actually take it elsewhere, Father? Jonas asked. No, I just have to make the selection. I weigh them, hand the larger over to the nurturer who is standing by, waiting, and then I get the smaller one all cleaned up and comfy. Then I perform a small ceremony of release. He glanced down, grinning at Gabriel. Then I wave bye-bye, he said, in a special sweet voice he used when he spoke to the new child. He waved his hand in the familiar gesture. Gabriel giggled and waved bye-bye back to him. And somebody else comes to get him? Somebody from elsewhere? That's right, Jonas. Jonas Bonus. Jonas rolled his eyes in embarrassment that his father had used the silly pet name. Lily was deep in thought. What if they give the little twin a name elsewhere? A name like, maybe Jonathan. And here in our community, at his naming, the twin that we kept here is given the name Jonathan. And then there would be 2 children with the same name, and they would look exactly the same. And someday, maybe when they were a 6, one group of 6s would go visit another community on a bus. And there in the community, and the other group of 6s would be Jonathan, and he was the exact same as the other Jonathan. And then maybe the pair would get mixed up and take the wrong Jonathan home, and maybe his parents wouldn't notice. And then, she paused for a breath. Lily, Mother said, I have a wonderful idea. Maybe when you become a 12, they'll give you the assignment of storyteller. I don't think we have a storyteller in the community for a long time, but if I were on the committee, I would definitely choose you for that job. Lily grinned. I have a better idea for one more story, she announced. What if, actually, we were all twins and didn't know it, and elsewhere there would be another Lily and another Jonas and another Father and another Asher and another Chief Elder and another... Father groaned. Lily, he said, it's bedtime. Giver, Jonas asked the next afternoon, do you ever think about release? Do you mean my own release or just the general topic of release? Both, I guess. I apologize. I mean, I should have been more precise, but I don't know exactly what I mean. Sit back up. No need to lie down while we're talking, Jonas, who had already been stretched out on the bed when the question came to his mind, sat back up. I guess I do think about it occasionally, the giver said. I think about my own release when I'm in an awful lot of pain. I wish I could put in a request for it sometimes, but I'm not permitted to do so until the new receiver is trained. Me, Jonas said in a dejected voice. He was not looking forward to the end of the training when he would become the new receiver. It was clear to him that What a terrible, difficult, and lonely life it was, despite the honor. I can't request release either, Jonas pointed out. It was in my rules. The giver laughed harshly. I know that. They hammered out those rules after the failure 10 years ago. Jonas has heard again and again now reference to the previous failure, but he still did not know what had happened 10 years ago. Giver, he said, tell me what happened, please. The giver shrugged. On the surface, it was quite simple. A receiver was to be selected the way you were. The selection went smoothly enough. The ceremony was held and the selection was made. The crowd cheered as they did for you. The new receiver was puzzled and a little frightened, as you were. My parents told me it was a female. The giver nodded. Jonas thought of his favorite female, Fiona, and shivered. He wouldn't want his gentle friend to suffer the way he had, taking on the memories. What was she like? He asked the giver. The giver looked sad, thinking about it. She was a remarkable young woman, very self-possessed and serene, intelligent, eager to learn. He shook his head and drew in a deep breath. You know, Jonas, she came to me in this room when she presented herself to begin training. Jonas interrupted him with a question. Can you tell me her name? My parents said it wasn't to be spoken again in the community, but couldn't you say it just to me? The giver hesitated painfully, as if saying the name aloud might be excruciating. Her name was Rosemary, he told Jonas finally. Rosemary, I like that name, the giver went on. When she came to me for the first time, she sat there in a chair where you sat on your first day. She was eager and excited and a little scared. We talked. I tried to explain things as well as I could. The way you did to me? The giver chuckled ruefully. The explanations are difficult. The whole thing is beyond one's experience, but I tried. And she listened carefully, and her eyes were luminous, I remember. He looked up suddenly. Jonas, I gave you the memory that I told you was my favorite. I still have a shred of it left. The room with the family and grandparents? Jonas nodded. Of course he remembered. Yes, he said. It had that wonderful feeling in it. You told me it was love. You can understand then. That's what I felt for Rosemary, the giver explained. I loved her. I feel it for you too, he added. What happened to her? Jonas asked. Her training began. She received well, as you do. She was so enthusiastic, so delighted to experience new things. I remember her laughter. His voice faltered and trailed off. What happened? Jonas asked after a moment. Please tell me. The giver closed his eyes. It broke my heart, Jonas, to transfer pain to her, but it was my job. It was what I had to do, the way I have had to do it to you. The room was silent. Jonas waited. Finally, the giver continued. 5 weeks. That was all. I gave her happy memories, a ride on a merry-go-round, a kitten to play with, a picnic. Sometimes I choose one because I know that would make her laugh. So I treasured the sound of that laughter in this room that has always been so silent. But she was like you, Jonas. She wanted to experience everything. She knew that it was her responsibility, so she asked me for more difficult memories. Jonas held his breath for a moment. You didn't give her war, did you? Not after just 5 weeks. The giver shook his head and sighed. No, and I didn't give her physical pain, but I gave her loneliness, and I gave her loss. And I transferred a memory of a child taken from its parents. That was the first one. She appeared stunned at its end. Jonas swallowed. Rosemary and her laughter had begun to seem real to him, and he pictured her looking up from the bed of memories, shocked. The giver continued. I backed off. I gave her more little delights, but everything changed. Once she knew about pain, I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't brave enough, Jonas suggested. The giver didn't respond to the question. She insisted that I continue, that I not spare her. She said it was her duty, and I knew, of course, that she was correct. I couldn't bring myself to inflict physical pain on her, but I gave her anguish of many kinds, poverty, hunger, terror. I had to, Jonas. It was my job, and she had been chosen. The giver looked at him imploringly. Jonas shook his head. Finally, one afternoon, we finished for the day. It had been a hard session. I tried to finish, as I do with you, by transferring something happy and cheerful, but the times of laughter were gone by then. She stood up very silently, frowning, as if she were making a decision. Then she came over to me, put her arms around me. She kissed me on the cheek. As Jonas watched the giver stroke his own cheek, recalling the touch of Rosemary's lips 10 years before, she left here that day, left this room, and did not go back to her dwelling. I was notified by the speaker that she had gone directly to the chief elder and asked to be released. But it's against the rules. The receiver in training can't apply for It's in your rules, Jonas, but it wasn't in hers. She asked for release, and they had to give it to her. I never saw her again. So that was the failure, Jonas thought. It was obvious that it had saddened the giver very deeply, but it didn't seem such a terrible thing after all. And he, Jonas, would never have done it, never have requested release, no matter how difficult his training became. The giver needed a successor, and he had been chosen. A thought had occurred to Jonas. Rosemary had been released very early in her training. What if something happened to him? Jonas. He had a whole year's worth of memories now. The giver asked, I can't request release. I know that. But what if something happened? An accident? What if I fell into the river like that little 4 Caleb did? Well, that doesn't make sense because I'm a good swimmer. But what if I couldn't swim and fell into the river and was lost? Then there would be a new receiver, but you would have already given away an awful lot of important memories. So even though they would select a new receiver, the memories would be gone except for the shreds that you had left of them. And then what if he started to laugh suddenly. I sound like my sister Lily, he said, amused at himself. The giver looked at him gravely. You stay away from the river, my friend, he said. The community lost Rosemary after 5 weeks, and it was a disaster for them. I don't know what the community would do if they lost you. All right, that is 16 minutes, so I am going to stop there at the top of page 147. I'll see you guys tomorrow.